I am Don Test, better known as the Dawn of Beer.
And I am Em Sauter, better known as Pints and Panels.
Welcome to episode 95 of the All About Beer podcast. Every episode, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. In this episode, episode 95, we are going to talk about one of my favorite beer styles, Saison. But first, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And please visit allaboutbeer.com/support to support this show and others. There are opportunities for both businesses and individuals to support the show and independent journalism, so please check out that page. So, Em,
Yes.
do you like Saison? And if so, Belgian or Français?
I like Saison. I don't subscribe to the like Belgian versus French. To me, everything it's just Saison.
Okay.
But that it feels like that could be a little bit of a hot take. I Saisons are especially my favorite thing about Saisons, which is kind of I love the minerality of them when it like there's like
Oh,
a wet stone gravel. I think it's just from like the dryness or whatnot or the yeast. It's really, really lovely. It's very prevalent in DuPont. And
is
then
that a
like
water thing or is that a yeast thing?
I think it could be both.
Okay. Well, I'll find out, right?
I want someone to comment and be like, Actually, excuse me," and then push their fake glasses up and tell me what it is.
And it'll
But
be some answer out of left field, like
which would be great.
maize sprigs or
Um,
something. I
yeah, I
just
love
completely made that
yeah.
up.
But to answer your question, yes, I love Saisons. Of course,
Good,
I
so
love
do I.
Saisons.
Yeah.
Wow, we have so much in
Early,
common.
I've been into beer for like 30 years and like it was probably my first like favorite beer style. Um, and since I've
Yeah, it
been
was one of
then
mine as well. Like wit
yeah,
beers, and then I transferred into wit beer is my like style that really got me into beer. And then I'd saisons were like, um, I just all I want is Jack d'Or from. Did you ever get to
yeah,
from
pretty
Pretty
things.
Thing? Well,
Yeah.
now St. Mars of the Desert, but they still make Jack d'Or, and it tastes like you think it would, and it is
Yeah.
spectacular. And saisons are great. The end.
Yes. Well, not the end. We have a
Well,
whole episode coming.
oh shit, you're right.
But
Never mind.
first, if you'd like to help support the All About Beer podcast, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of supporting this show, here is a word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Athletic Brewing's non-alcoholic beer tastes so good, you won't believe it's non-alcoholic. Their brews are available at over 75,000 grocery stores, liquor stores, bars, and restaurants nationwide. Or you can grab some of their limited time offerings directly from their website. That's where you'll find exciting innovations like their first ever nitrogen-infused dark brew, Emerald Cliffs. And right now, you can save up to 25% and get a free glass and unlock access to exclusive brews when you sign up for the Athletic Club and purchase 4 or more six-packs. Go to athleticbrewing.com to get brews shipped directly to your door or find retailers near you. Near Beer. Terms and conditions. Certain limitations apply. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times.
Tired of inconsistent fermentations and off flavors in your beer? It's time to strike back with Yeast Lightning Nutrient from Escarpment Labs. Unlike generic nutrients, Yeast Lightning is a balanced blend containing bioavailable zinc, magnesium, and B vitamins designed specifically for beer yeast. It's been proven to shorten fermentation times and improve final beer flavor. Plus, it helps you get more generations out of your yeast, saving you money on every batch. Whether it's a dry hopped IPA or a crisp lager, give your yeast the fuel that they actually need. Order your first pack today by emailing sales@escarpmentlabs.com. Mention the All About Beer podcast to get free shipping on your first order.
Today's episode is brought to you by Salvo, a 100% hop-derived variety specific aroma extract from Hopsteiner. Get all the benefits of variety-specific concentrated hop flavor without the unnecessary bitterness or vegetal matter. Salvo provides clean, concentrated aroma, scalable dosing, and yield savings efficiency. If your kettle and centrifuge could talk, they'd ask for Salvo by name.
Yvan de Baets is head brewer, co-owner, and co-founder of Brasserie de la Seine in Brussels, Belgium. He completed his formal brewing education in the Maurice Institute for Brewing and Malting Science in Brussels. He is now a guest speaker on the history of beer and brewing there, as well as at the postgraduate program of malting and brewing sciences at KU Leuven University, and in the International Brewing Methods course at Weinsteffen Brewing School in Freising/Munich. He is also a beer writer, specializing in ancient Belgian brewing techniques, and a lecturer in various brewing conferences and forums. He wrote the chapter on the history of Saison in Phil Markowski's book Farmhouse Ales, was technical editor of American Sour Beers, and a consultant for many other books published by Brewers Publications. Yvan judges in different international beer contests, including the World Beer Cup and European Beer Star. Welcome to the show, Yvan.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for having me.
We are very excited to have you here because
We are.
at the
True.
2026 Craft Brewers Conference, both Em and I were there. You did a presentation on your historical research into Saison. It was a very popular presentation.
I had to stand,
Hundreds.
yeah. I had to stand all the way in the back because I got distracted drinking non-alcoholic beer.
So you showed up late.
So I didn't show up late. I showed up right as it started, but it was so crowded that I stood in the back with Gordon Strong.
Yeah,
Anyway.
very, very popular. So good for
Mhm.
you, Yvan. Can I ask, first of all, just as a personal matter, why are you personally so interested in Saison? Why do you love it so much?
No, actually, it started in 2003. I've been asked by my friend Phil Markowski to participate to the book he was writing, Farmers Ale. And so I started some research. And as many Belgians, I thought that just because I'm Belgian, I knew everything about Saisons. And then just by starting the research, I realized that basically I knew almost nothing about it.
Oh,
And I realized that the subject is extremely complex, and I really fell in love with that complexity, and I really wanted to know everything about them. And this research ended in 2004 when the book was published. That was the first part, but it was an ongoing research for me, and still today I continue because there's so many things to be discovered. I also consider that because it's such a difficult style, if you get to understand Saisons, it's way easier for you to understand the other styles, because they will actually be easier to tackle once you understand Saisons.
oh, interesting.
So Don and I were there, but maybe many of our listeners were not in the room when you talked about your findings. Can you summarize what you discovered about Saison that you talked about at the Craft Brewers Conference this year?
Yeah, there are many things, of course, but
I know, I was gonna say, well,
There was a couple mic drop moments, though. That's what.
no, let's put it that way. First of all, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Somehow you have to put Saison into a broader context and into a broader family, and that family is the family of the Belgian bière de garde in French, which means beers to be kept. I know that for the geeks among us, bière de garde is a style of beer related to north of France, and it is, but actually that's the way the scholars, the brewing scholars in Belgium, the guys writing the fancy brewing treatises, talked about a family of beers that we had and that were meant to be kept for a very long period. And you had basically three main styles within that broad family. One were the lambic beers of Brussels and surroundings. The other ones were the Flemish, let's call them red brown. Sorry, the real name is oud bruin in Flemish, which means old brown. The Flemish red actually never existed from a historical point of view. It's an invention of Michael Jackson from 1977. He made that up actually to
he liked to do that actually for other stuff too. So
it was great. It saved so many things in Belgian brewing culture, but that was one of his inventions, let's say. So there were the Flemish old brown, and then the Saisons. And it was really beers that were extremely closely related in the way they were made, but especially in the way they tasted. And it's funny, if you look at the map, and you put the emphasis on the regions where there was a very high concentration of those beers. You see on the map that those regions, they form like one single region actually, and that there is no real frontier between them. And it was regions where first the brewers would use the same kind of brewing techniques, and especially the people who wanted to drink the same kind of beers. And the flavors they wanted to find in those beers were a tartness, so an appealing sourness, not an extreme sourness, but an appealing one, and wine-like flavors. And the sourness in beer and the wine-like flavors was called in the past the taste of the North. That's what the people of our regions wanted to have in their best beers. I'm talking about Belgium, the whole country, the southern part of the Netherlands, and the northern part of France. From a sociological point of view, the people had the same taste in those regions. So Saisons are very close to hot brown and lambic beers, but the other important things I wanted to point is that there are lots of myths that have been recently created about Saisons, and the main one is that some called the Saison yeast would exist, and this is totally wrong. Actually, it never existed. Actually, what's very important to understand in the ancient way of making Saisons is that there were two fermentations that were equally important: the primary and the secondary fermentation. And actually, the secondary fermentation was even more important than the primary. And to start the primary fermentation of your Saison, you could use basically any kind of yeast. And so the Saison yeast is a pure invention of the yeast companies. I have traces in all the records, in all brewing records, of breweries using many different kind of yeast for making the first fermentation. But those brewers, like their customers, they wanted to have a constant taste in their Saison. That's not something new. People have always wanted consistency in the beers they were drinking, but they knew they would get it. Why? Because after the main fermentation, the Saisons would age in wooden barrels. And what lives in a wooden barrel in a small brewery in Belgium at the time, it's of course Brettanomyces. And so the main thing to remember that if there exists one Saison yeast, it is the Brettanomyces. They were actually the common denominator for the making of Saisons. And it's the Brettanomyces that would give the right aromatics to the Saisons, and including that typical wine-like flavor. This is something typical for breads, a part of the tartness of the acidity in those beers also, but not only Brettanomyces gave sourness, also lactic acid bacteria, and the breads also gave the final attenuation in those beers. So that's in a very short summary the two main points to understand for the historical Saisons.
Love it.
And now the beautiful thing is that we can prove that scientifically. It has been my theory since almost more than 20 years. When reading old books, when talking with ancient brewers, I had that chance. I interviewed about 15 of them. Lots of them are sadly passed away since. I had also the chance to be able to taste Saisons from disappeared breweries. And so it was already my conclusion. But now the nice thing is that I have a small research project with the Brewing School of Weinstefan next to Munich in Germany. And I could collect a few bottles of Saisons of disappeared breweries. And I brought them to the professors there, mainly Martin Zankov, Matthias Hutzler, and Juan Haguerre. And they are trying to make a characterization of the yeast that we found in those old bottles. The bottles are dating from the 1970s, 60s, 50s. Even one bottle is from 1939. And in all of the bottles but one, we found Brettanomyces. And so really proves that the typical yeast for saisons were Brett.
Interesting.
So, did you get to try these super old beers?
Yeah,
And
that's a cool thing. Well, not always cool because they are not all in great shape, of course. But
fair, but what was that? What was that like?
Actually, some of them were perfectly good, and the best one, guess what? It was the oldest one from 1939. That beer
Really?
was perfectly drinkable. It's one of the most stunning sensory experience I've ever had in my life. It's like literally drinking liquid past, and the beer was in perfect condition. And all the best examples, they were on a blind test exactly like a perfectly kept eau de gueuse. In fact, they had all the characteristics of a great eau de gueuse, which
And
once again proves the relationship
yes.
between those three styles of beers.
So this bottle from 1939, is it
Mm.
a cork or what is like I'm
A
just
cork.
wondering how it was preserved for so long.
Yeah, it's a luck. I've had it was corked, indeed, and almost no leaking has happened in the bottle. That's a small miracle. It's
Yeah.
actually a cool story. I have a friend. He collects many things about beer, and he has a friend who is from the family of that brewery that closed. I think in the 1950s, and in one of the family houses in the cellar, they found old bottles of their Saison, and he got one as a gift. And when he told me that, I begged to get another one for bringing it to one Yvan, and she
Yeah.
was again to give me one. And so it's thanks to that lovely woman that we could do those analysis on that old bottle.
That's amazing.
Mm.
So, in modern day, I think a lot of, at least in North America, a lot of brewers think of there being a Belgian Saison versus a French Saison, mostly the
Mhm.
distinction being the yeast strain. So,
Yeah.
are you saying this distinction is not really valid, or what do you then think of these modern Saisons?
Yeah, the French Saison yeast, that's another story. It's very funny. I will tell you about it. But actually, the French Bière de Garde and the Wallonian Saisons, they were extremely closely related. It was basically the same kind of beers. And at the time, the French brewers, they were looking to what was happening in Belgium in brewing, because we're a more famous beer country. And for making their bière de garde in the north, they were using the same techniques that our brewers in Belgium. They called their beers bière de garde most of the time, but in some instances, and I have that in some documentation in old books, they called their bière de garde saisons as well in north of France. So it was really like brothers and sisters kind of beers. Now about the so-called French Saison yeast, it's hilarious because this is pure bullshit. Actually, the story goes like that: the yeast companies took the yeast that was in the bottle of the Brasserie Thirier in northern France. Brasserie Thirier is one of the best French brewery. They make wonderful beers. They are wonderful people. And because they are in the region of Bière de Garde, the yeast companies thought, oh, that must be a historical, typical yeast of the region, blah, blah. The thing is that Brasserie Thirier exists only since 1980, so it's not a new brewery, but it's not an old one. And the so-called French yeast they are using is coming from the brewing school. I studied that, and I'm now teaching at, which is located in Brussels. So it is a yeast that is coming from Belgium. Uh, about that yeast, nobody knows its origins, sadly. In the Brewing School, they have a small notebook manually written where all the professors were teaching at the school. When they brought a yeast, they would always write the origin of that yeast. But for that one, and I checked that little notebook, there is absolutely nothing written. So we don't know at all its origin. We don't know if it was ever used in any brewery making a saison. Maybe yes, maybe not. It's a pure mystery.
Hmm.
So we don't know, but sure thing, it's not a French yeast, and nobody knows if it ever was used for making Saison. The thing that also pushed, I guess, those yeast companies to call it a Saison something yeast is that it's a positive yeast, so phenolic or flavor positive yeast, and it's diastaticus yeast. And there is a belief among a lot of people that for making a Saison, you need a POF positive yeast and a diastaticus. It's another bullshit. In none of the beers we sampled at Wine Stefan, we had the phenols coming from Saccharomyces cerevisiae. We had phenols from Brettanomyces, tons of them, but not the phenols like the ones you have in Saison du Pont, for instance. Not at all. And there is absolutely no need for a yeast that you use for Saison to be diastaticus. I think myself that it would be almost a mistake to bring that in your brewery because it's a very dangerous yeast. And the attenuation of Saison has to be high, but we are not aiming for a total super attenuated beer. It can happen, and when it happens, it's most of the time because of the Brettanomyces.
Right.
But keep in mind that not all the Brettanomyces will super attenuate the beer. There are plenty of Brett strains that are well attenuative. I mean, they will go to 85, 90% maybe, but not 100%. Only a few of them will do that, but not per se all of them. Using a diastaticus yeast, as I told you, the brewers, they would start with many different yeasts, and certainly that most of them were not diastaticus. For the phenolic or flavor yeast, there is a sort of a pressure from the brewers and the customers to in the past to avoid them, because phenolic flavors are not a flavor that is liked, that is appreciated by so many people. And I think that in a lot of cases, when the brewer adds a yeast giving too many phenols, he would try to sort of discard it. So it's not at all mandatory, but it doesn't mean that you cannot make a Saison with a POF positive yeast. And if you imagine an old brewery having some wild Saccharomyces in their leaven of microorganisms they were using, it's very typical for wild Saccharomyces to be POF positive. So it's one possibility. It's not the only possibility. That's what I want to say about it.
Right.
So there are many, when I think of Saison, and a lot of people, I guess maybe this is the United States' fault, but when we think of modern Saison, they don't have Brett, there's a lot of phenols. That's what things are labeled as Saison here. And we think of Saison DuPont and whatnot.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that now that you've done all this research? Are you like,
again, you have to put the Saison du Pont context. The problem, and it's a great problem we have, is that for some ancient styles, you basically have only one remaining brewery that was there since generations, still making an ancient style of beer. And often the people believe it's the only way to make those beers. But you always have to think about the context of every brewery. And in the case of DuPont, for instance, don't get me wrong, Saison DuPont is a wonderful beer. It's absolutely great. But you have to think about the context of that very brewery. And the context of DuPont is that even if it was a brewery, a small brewery located in a small village in the middle of the countryside, in the middle of nowhere in Belgium, it was run by a guy, is the grandfather of the current owner, who was a very highly trained brewing engineer. He studied in the brewing school of Ghent. His name was Sylvain Rosier, and he was obsessed by technology and by innovation. in a small brewery in the middle of nowhere. To give you an example on his mindset, he invented, along with a brewing professor from Brussels, a revolutionary bottling machine for beer that allowed the brewers to bottle without any contact with the air. They named that
Oh,
machine the Rolla bottling machine. They invented it in 1937. That machine was produced in Belgium, but also under license in Germany, and it was used in some very fancy and big breweries until the 1960s. I've seen some pictures of that. This is just it just gives you the context, the mindset of the guy, and so. He modernized his small brewery very, very early. And one thing he did about his process for Saison is that already in the 1930s, instead of aging them in wooden barrels like everybody would do, he decided to go in metal tanks instead of wooden barrels. And of course, when you do that, it has a huge influence on the kind of microorganisms that are involved in your fermentation. And for the Brettanomyces, it's not a great thing to go from wood to metal. They don't live in metal tanks. It doesn't mean that the breads totally disappeared from the brewery, I think, but it lowered their presence dramatically for sure. And then after the war in 1958, he asked to his daughter, Claude Allard, whom I could interview 2 times, to select the main yeasts that were still present in the leaven that they were using. You know, the 1950s in Belgium, it's really the years where a lot of breweries started to select some strains of yeast that they considered were the major yeasts involved in their fermentation. Think about Chimay, for instance, the Trappist of Chimay. They selected their typical yeast in 1954. Dupont did that in 1958. But so that was another move at Dupont to modernize the way their Saison was made. And probably they didn't find Brettanomyces in their leaven because the beer was matured in metal tanks, or maybe they found it and they didn't want them because it's not that easy to work with Brettanomyces. Whatever, they selected one main strain, and I think there are one or two other ones, but they're a little bit secretive about that, so I'm not sure of what I say. But they selected one for sure that became the famous Dupont yeast, and it's a yeast that is extremely typical because it's a phenolic bomb. When you open a bottle of any beer from Dupont in a room, your nose will detect it even if you're far from the bottle because it's so typical, and it gives absolutely great beers. Once again, but this beer, the Saison Dupont, it's just the way that a specific brewery, only one brewery, decided to evolve in its own history. So it's totally a valid beer for the Dupont brewery, but it doesn't represent the way that all the other Saisons were made at the time.
Lovely. That's awesome.
I,
Of
I,
course,
I could name some other kind of beers that people think are the perfect example of Belgium styles, and that are also an evolution in a specific brewery. The problem is that a lot of the breweries making ancient styles, they stopped the production at some point, or they stopped making the style in question. And so when you have only a very, very few examples remaining, you must be extremely careful before you take conclusions about a style, because
right,
the reality was always way more complex.
right. Of course, Yvan, you are the mastermind behind Brasserie de la Seine,
Mhm.
and you at Brasserie de la Seine make Saison. So,
Yeah.
given your research now, how does that, um, you know, uh, color the way you make Saison at Brasserie de la Seine, and what do
Uh-huh.
you hope brewers and beer lovers understand about Saison now?
All right, so we make 3 styles of Saison or sub-styles. If you want, we make Saison de Meiboom, and that's a very clean version of our Saison. It's fermented only with our house Saccharomyces. And one of the typical features Saisons should have, and it's very hard to define, they have a sort of a rusticity. Difficult to define because what is rustic for me, what is rustic for you, what is rustic for the audience, we'll all have our own definition, of course, but it's flavors that are not like super clean like a lager or even like a pale ale, and when I say not super clean, it's not on a negative way, but you understand what I mean.
Yes.
You have some funkiness also. If you work with Brettanomyces, it's super easy because you get it right away. If you age your beer in wood, also if you use bacteria, also, etc., etc. If you make a clean version, it's a little bit more difficult. And my way to tackle it is to play with ancient grains, ancient hop varieties that will give it a touch of a farmer's touch. Let's call it that way. We make another Saison that we simply call Brett Saison, and the name says it all. So by making this beer, we just wanted to put the emphasis on the importance of Brettanomyces in the history of Saison making, and so it's a clean beer. It only goes in stainless steel, but it's re-fermented with our house strain of Brettanomyces, and of course it imparts the typical flavors from the breads. It's a bread showcase, let's say. And then we make the Saison de la Seine. This is really the result of all my research and my interpretation of one of the ways, because there were many ways of making Saisons in the past. And one of the techniques, and so that Saison de la Seine is a barrel-aged beer. And one of the different ways for making Saisons in the past was to make 2 beers. You first would make a beer that you would let age for months and months, sometimes years, and you would let the beer acidify in wood, and of course in wood you would have the action of Brettanomyces. And then a few months before you would send the beer to the customers, you would brew a second beer, a fresh beer, and you would blend your old beer, your old sour beer with your fresh beer. That technique of blending 2 different beers was called in French the coupage technique. And I would say that probably 70% of the Saisons were obtained by that technique. It's a technique that was used also for other beers in Belgium. It was a very important technique and in use until the 1950s, 60s, let's say, in our country. And so Saison de la Seine is obtained by a coupage. I told you that you could possibly make the 2 beers in your brewery, but in many cases, actually, the brewer making his Saison in Belgium would not especially make the old beer himself, but he would buy the fanciest and the most highly regarded sour beer of the time in Belgium, and that was the Lambic of Brussels. You had in Brussels, lambic breweries, sometimes very big breweries, they would never put any lambic in a bottle for making gueules or whatever. They would only make the lambic, age them in wooden barrels, and sell them to other breweries in bulk for those other breweries making their bière de coupage. And among the bière de coupage, they were Saisons. And this is what we did with Saison de la Seine. So we brewed our Saison. I love to use spelt for Saison, so there is almost 50% of spelt. And we mixed it with Cantillon Lambic. We are very close to Cantillon. Then we barrel aged them for 2 years, between 2 and 3 years. Mother Nature decides when the beer is ready. And right before bottling the beer, we do a light dry hopping, because this is also something that was frequently done for the saisons, is a light dry hopping, also to give back a kick of freshness, of fresh aromatics from the hops to the beer. So
Right.
this is my interpretation of the historical style.
Just one quick follow-up question. When they do the coupage, is that just to blend flavors, or is it almost like a Krausen technique?
It's not like a Krausen because your fresh beer is finished.
Okay.
It's not fermenting yet, and they were making coupage for many reasons. The main reason was to give the flavor of an old sour beer to a fresh beer, because now when you say to something taste of an old beer, it doesn't seem very sexy, it doesn't sound very sexy, but at the time old was a very positive word. It was super positive to talk about an old sour beer, a well kept, well aged sour beer, and it's actually to be totally fair, a way to make the beer with the right aromatics that you want on a cheaper way, because you make more volume actually if you make a bulk of fresh beer and you use a small percentage of old beer to give the right flavor. It costs you less money actually. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is that when you think about it, it allows you to make so many different beers with only 2 batches of beer. By varying the proportions of the old beer versus the fresh beer, you have so many possibilities. You can add just a little bit of it, and then you just have a touch of funkiness and of acidity. You can add some more, and then eventually your saison will become like an old goose. It's so rich. The coupage technique was used not only in Belgium but in the UK also. I don't have enough knowledge for Germany, but I'm quite sure at some point they must have used it as well. It's a very nice way to be creative. In fact, it offers so many possibilities. And a third reason for doing coupage, it was a way to protect the beer against further infections. And the ancient people, they knew that it was working. They couldn't tell exactly why, but when you think about it, if you add an old sour beer to a young one, you instantly drop the pH of the entire beer, and you will prevent lots of microorganisms that could possibly be an infection to act in your beer. So it's a very efficient way to protect your beer. The ancient brewers, after vaccination was discovered by Pasteur, they used the term when they were making the coupage. They said, yeah, no, we will vaccinate our beer with an old sour beer. And
Interesting. This was fascinating, Yvan. Thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, this was great. I learned a lot. Your thoughts?
Oh yeah. No, I mean I could listen to you talk forever, but we
Yeah, unfortunately.
let's let you know.
We're another moment.
Yes, we'll come
Yeah.
back. Yeah, come back for part 2. So
Yeah. This was fascinating. Thank you, Yvan. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so
Welcome.
much.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Right. And we'll be right back with Mike Schallau of Was Brewing after a word from our sponsors. Tired of inconsistent fermentations and off flavors in your beer? It's time to strike back with Yeast Lightning Nutrient from Escarpment Labs. Unlike generic nutrients, Yeast Lightning is a balanced blend containing bioavailable zinc, magnesium, and B vitamins designed specifically for beer yeast. It's been proven to shorten fermentation times and improve final beer flavor. Plus, it helps you get more generations out of your yeast, saving you money on every batch. Whether it's a dry hopped IPA or a crisp lager, give your yeast the fuel that they actually need. Order your first pack today by emailing sales@escarpmentlabs.com. Mention the All About Beer podcast to get free shipping on your first order.
Let's talk about brewhouse efficiency. Replacing pellet loads with salvo can not only boost aroma density, but reduce true load and increase beer wort. Seems like simple math, but if it's still not obvious, replacing pellets with salvo can give you more beer per batch with better brewhouse efficiency. Salvo, designed for brewers who are tired of sacrificing yield for aroma. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Athletic Brewing's non-alcoholic beer tastes so good, you won't believe it's non-alcoholic. Their brews are available at over 75,000 grocery stores, liquor stores, bars, and restaurants nationwide. Or you can grab some of their limited time offerings directly from their website. That's where you'll find exciting innovations like their first ever nitrogen-infused dark brew, Emerald Cliffs. And right now, you can save up to 25% and get a free glass and unlock access to exclusive brews when you sign up for the Athletic Club and purchase 4 or more six-packs. Go to athleticbrewing.com to get brews shipped directly to your door or find retailers near you. Near Beer. Terms and conditions. Certain limitations apply. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times.
Mike Schallau has been brewing beer professionally for over a decade. He started at Pipeworks Brewing as an unpaid intern and rose through the ranks to oversee all daily operations, recipe development, and the barrel aging program before departing to start Is Was. He has grown Is Was Brewing from just an idea into one of the top Saison breweries in the world. His beers have won multiple gold medals at the Festival of Wood and Barrel Aged Beers. Mike has brewed collaboration beers on 3 continents, and he co-hosts the Beer Temple podcast. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I must confess, I am not familiar. So please tell us a little bit about Is Was and what your brewing philosophy is.
Is Was is a small Saison-focused brewery located in the Ravenswood neighborhood of Chicago. For the first about 5 years of our existence, we rented space from other breweries like Mars and Beguile, and got our own brewery and tap room in Ravenswood about 2 years ago. The idea was always to be Saison focused, but wasn't initially to only make Saison, but that's kind of what we've done. The philosophy is to be respectful of the history, tradition, and techniques of brewing Saison, while also being aware of and responsive to advances in brewing technology or flavor technology, or just the modern American palate, to make things that are simultaneously traditional and forward thinking.
Okay, cool. Why do you love Saison so much? Like, why a Saison focused brewery?
When I got into Saison, I got into beer generally. It was like a little bit before there were quite as many American craft breweries as there are now, and not quite as many local craft breweries. And I worked at a store called West Lakeview Liquors, which is here in Chicago. And it was kind of the first craft beer store in Chicago. And at that time, the most interesting things and the most artistic and creative beers being made, in my opinion, were coming from these small producers in Belgium making Saison or Lambic or things like that were a little bit more romantic and a little bit more rustic and a little bit more interestingly complex than what was happening in American craft beer to my palate, a little bit more yeast driven. I'm not sure if I knew all that at the time, but find dry yeast driven beers to be the most interesting and most drinkable for me.
Cool.
So I'm looking at your draft list right now,
Sure.
and it's mainly your Saisons, and then there's some guest beers, and then
Yep.
there's some you have a pale ale. That's
We
charming.
do a pale ale, yeah.
What?
Yeah, it says,
Yep.
yeah, there's a Midwest pale ale.
Okay.
So I mean, you have so many on right now. Some of them I'm like, there's like a koji rice one that's cool, buckwheat. Some of them I'm like, what is like horses, elephants? How do you approach this amount of Saison? Is there like a base style and then you riff? Or like, are you building these like recipes up from scratch? Like, I'm overwhelmed by Saison.
My joke to the rest of our team is there's basically one beer and they're all,
Okay.
but it's really not true. A lot of those are like whole cloth, at least grain bill and hop bill wise, unique beers. There's some philosophies that overarch all of them, and there's some choices that are overarching to all of them. Like we use the same yeast for pretty much every beer. And it's just a yeast you can get off the shelf. It's 042 Belgian Saison 2 from Omega. We treat it a little bit differently than a lot of people do, where we ferment it. We started it at 80 to 84 degrees and let it go up from there. We also do open top fermentation, and we top crop it. So within the first couple of generations of getting it from Omega, it's changed quite a bit. It's much more flocculent. The ester profile has kind of shifted more towards the pineapple tropical fruit world and away from banana and bubblegum.
Oh,
So all of the beers use that yeast. And then most of the beers also then towards the tail end of fermentation have a blend of Brettanomyces added to them. And that's just added from previous batches of beer that have had Brettanomyces in them. It's a blend that we also got from Omega, and then we added some things too, had them take a couple things out of it. And then we've just been repitching that for about 4 years from dregs of previous bottles. And then, so that's like the kind of the fermentation thing that ties all of them together. We also tend to use a lot, 20+% of adjunct grains in the mash often, to add body and character. But that changes. So like our flagship beer is a combination of spelt and triticale. We use a lot of spelt. We use wheat, we use rye, we use oats, all kind of in that way. And that also allows us to kind of push and pull on the different things the yeast wants to do. The yeast will become more phenolic if we feed it more ferulic acid from the wheat, and less phenolic if we use spelt, which is why we choose spelt more often. We're trying to make a more ester-driven Saison as opposed to a more phenolic-driven Saison. And then we knock all of those in quite hot. And then one of the other touchstones that most of the beers have, not all of them, but most of them tend to use a very high amount of very low alpha acid hops. So things that are like 3% alpha acid or lower tends to be the wheelhouse for us. That helps us have a lot of polyphenol in there, which along with like a lot of those high protein malts, and the yeast selection creates a much more body than you would have otherwise. Because these beers are finishing very, very, very dry.
cool. Cool.
We also, one other thing that we think we do that's maybe a little bit different than a lot of people is it's very chloride heavy water profile. We don't live on a romantic well. We get water from Lake Michigan, like every other brewery in Chicago. So there isn't like a great story to tell about that. So we intentionally build a much more chloride and relatively lower sulfate ratio compared to what a lot of our Saison friends are doing with their water profiles.
Okay. Just as a matter of necessity in that case.
As a matter of like, it was built on the idea of meeting people's palates where they are. If we're going to offer them this very, very dry thing, it might be helpful to have this chloride that's very prominent in a lot of IPA brewing currently. And it helps build the body out again. Like body helps replace the sugar that taken away when these beers get very dry.
Okay. So you mentioned, a couple specialty grains there, spelt and triticale. I heard. I assume you worked with some others too. Are you like when you're looking at your saison? Are you thinking how can I make something better? Like you mentioned, higher protein to get more body, or are you learning about spelt and triticale and think to yourself, oh, I'm gonna make a saison out of that? Like what's driving your recipe development / creativity?
Both of those things. The ideas come from many places. Most of the time, it's that I want to taste something, and I try to reverse engineer that taste and flavor and texture. Earlier on in Iswas, it was much more experimental, being like, what happens when we feed this yeast, something that's 30% oats? What happens when we feed this yeast something that's 30% rye? We have a lot of those answers now, so now it's more kind of pulling and tweaking and fine tuning things to make interesting expressions from this same yeast. And everything is really driven by what we're going to feed the yeast and how the yeast is going to behave. So a lot of those choices are made based on flavor. We certainly get some like really wonderful, unique malted spelt from Sugar Creek Malt in Indiana. We get pretty much all of our malt from Sugar Creek. But for some reason, the spelt, I have to kind of talk him into doing it because no one else buys it from him, I guess. It is incredible. It tastes like cantaloupe and cherries, and I'm not sure how much of that is making it through to the final beer, but it has this insane, delicious flavor to it. And that's part of the reason we use it all the time is that I've never tasted a malt out of my hand that tastes like that. And it also allows us to have all of the nuttiness and protein character you get from wheat without all of the precursor for the kind of clove-like phenolic, which we tend to steer away from.
Oh,
That answer the
okay,
question?
cool.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that's
All right.
cool.
Okay.
And then I want to go back to talking about Brett because, so all your saisons have Brett in them, is that correct?
Not all
Oh,
of them.
not
In
all
fact,
of them, not all of
our,
them.
our,
Okay.
our flagship beer does not have
Doesn't.
bread.
Okay. Is there a
And
reason why some do and some don't? Is it like, I mean, are you looking for a particular flavor out of your whatever Brett strain you're using?
yeah, we use the same blend of Brettanomyces, which I think it started as all of the Bretts. We were experimenting with this thing called all of the Bretts that Omega had. I'm not even sure if they offered it before. And over time, we kind of worked with them to kind of understand what was in that, found some other Brettanomyces, and then created our own house blend, all of which were our lab cultures. We didn't really curate anything or culture anything from like the air. We do have a beer called Yvan that has some of my sourdough yeast starter in it, but that's a completely separate kind of wort stream or completely separate like family of beers that we make. But for the ones that have Brettanomyces in them, I think it's 9 was the last number of Brett we put in there, tending to lean towards citrus fruits and a little further away from the kind of phenolic things, just in case when you start stacking phenolics, it can be can get very aggressive very quickly. So if we make a beer with a bunch of wheat and then we add this very phenolic Brett to it, it could become a little less pleasurable. And we one of the very basic foundations that we come from when we're making a beer is we want people to drink it and we want people to like it and drink a lot of it. A lot of Saison in America was very, very challenging for a very long time as a way to demonstrate, this is my conjecture, as a way to demonstrate the brewer's skill or wackiness or I don't know, desire to make challenging beers was a thing in the early 2010s. And that was never really my thing. Challenging beer is interesting, but I want it to be inviting and challenging. I want people to drink these and have them be convivial and exciting. So we tend to steer towards Brett that was less kind of funky horse blankety and more citrusy, a little bit of that funkiness because that's kind of a hallmark of that style and it adds complexity. But I want people to like I like people to like things they're making. I want to like all the things we're making, and I don't want people to be scared of drinking Saison because it might be a little too funky or a little sour. We never really use lactic acid except for maybe in one beer or lactic acid bacteria. So I think the drinkability is the most important factor in that Brett selection. That was winding
Okay,
up.
cool. Well, I mean, you've talked about water, you've talked about grain, you talked about yeast and Brett. Well, Brett is a yeast, so I was duplicative there. But anyways,
wild yeast,
wild
Don.
yeast.
It's a separate.
You're
fine.
That's another thing. Like they call them wild yeast, but they're not really like.
I mean,
I'm not trying to. I'm sorry to be pedantic, but
No.
No.
We're all about
Do you know who you're talking to? Hello.
Of all the yeast, like Brettanomyces is one of the least wild. It's only really found where there's very abundant sources of sugar, and for some reason around goats. But and when you wild capture things, you're mostly getting, from what I've read, we don't really do a lot of it. You're mostly getting Saccharomyces that might behave as if it was phenolic or kind of like Brettanomyces. But when you get down to the actual microorganisms, those things are really only found in breweries and wineries. They're not, bred like Saccharomyces is. They're like Michael Jackson said, they're more like cats, but like they're dogs. But I guess they're not lab pitches often, even though ours were. So we chose these things. They weren't just like, whoops, we didn't do a good job cleaning. And that's something we take very seriously, to be honest, is the cleaning. We have very, very regimented cleaning processes. We autoclave a lot of things because we're not trying to make accidentally funky beers. Right. We're trying to make beers that have the flavor profile we care for.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on hops? You did mention every other ingredient. So
yeah, I mean, we tend to use large amounts of low alpha hops to add polyphenol, which is something I got out of Yvan's section of the Saison and Farmhouse Ales book.
Yeah.
And so we use a lot of, but we use a lot of modern versions of them. So we use a lot of like Grüngeist, which is kind of like Callista, and Saphir. We also use a lot of noble hops, and we do some things with more modern hops. We use some New Zealand hops and stuff. It honestly took me 7 years to kind of figure out how to meld something like Citra and the character I want out of our Saison yeast. Like we've played around with stuff like that once or twice a year, and every time I'm like, we basically just made an IPA again. And we've just kind of cracked the code on a Citra beer recently that presents just as much as a Saison as it does as like a hop forward pale ale would. Yeah, we tend to always use some noble type hop in these beers too, even when we're using more highfalutin stuff or more oil impacted things that have a more of a oil impact. Just because I feel like there needs to be a grounding in this style of beer. Otherwise, those hops are just so aggressive they'll take over.
Mhm.
I actually just had a friend from Yakima Chief came by unannounced about an hour before this call. And they're talking about a breeding program they're working on, trying to make low alpha hops for lager production in America. And they're talking about how they have a lot of them that are too fruity or too citrusy, and they get booted out of the program. And I'm like, what are you doing with those? They're like, well, we just throw them away most of the time. And I'm like, I'll take those. That's what we're looking for, because we're not just looking for bitterness. We're not just looking for the how saturated can this be with hop oils or whatever. The polyphenol is important to what we're doing as well.
Right. Cool.
So I see most of your saisons are like 5.2, 5.4%. Most of them
Yeah.
are 5 point. Is there a reason? Is this your sweet spot? Is this what you want to drink? Is this what customers want to drink? What's the reason for the target ABV?
Yeah, I think it mostly started with that's what I like to drink, and then we got good or got to understand how the yeast behaves with that ABV. At higher ABVs, you get very different expressions. When you have a 7% beer that's 0.4 Plato finishing gravity, that's going to drink very differently than a 6% beer or a 5% beer at that same finishing gravity. So I think it's the sweet spot. It goes back to that joke where they're all just one beer, where I know that works pretty well. We'll push it. We have some stuff that's 7% now, that thing that holds hops better. We have something that goes as low as 3.2. And we like to try to work across. We're trying to, honestly, it's an active thing to not try to force myself to brew more broadly across the ABV spectrum. But when there are beers that I'm conceptualizing and I think it would work in like the 3 to 4 range or the 6 to 7 range, that I'm trying to be more open with myself of putting those beers in those places to see how they work. I think that, yeah, 5.3 is like the ideal ABV for me as a beer drinker. So that's what our flagship beer is.
Cool. That's a reasonable explanation. You talked about all the different saisons you make and how you make them different grains and all that sort of thing. Do you think that the drinking public, appreciates and can acknowledge all these differences? And I guess a related question, what do you wish the average beer drinker, checking in on Untapped all the time, what do you wish they understood about Saison better?
Yeah, the average beer drinker, do they appreciate this?
Or maybe the
No.
average craft beer drinker, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Yes, I think they absolutely can appreciate the breadth of what we're doing or what people are doing with saisons. Um, to me, it seemed obvious that you can make a broad spectrum of beers with saison yeast. Not quite as broad as USO5 or something like that everyone makes all sorts of styles of beer with, but pretty close. And no one was really doing that. And so I wanted to explore it. I think there's definitely people who appreciate it and who love it. And a lot of them come to our tap room. Our tap room is 3 blocks from Hopleaf. So I think that having regulars who have been going to, live in the neighborhood and been going to Hopleaf for 30 years, coming into our tap room might be a little bit more open and a little bit more aware of what yeast expression, specifically phenolic and estery yeasts, might be doing. So that might help us a little bit locally. If there's one thing that I think I wish that the broader drinking public understood about Saison, it's hard to hard to say one thing because there's so many different producers, and one of the strengths and weaknesses of the Saison as a style is that there are as many valid ways to make it as there are people who really want to make it, or as there are producers who want to make it. And I don't want to say there's anything wrong with any of those. The way that we make Saison, and which has been a very conscious choice, I wish people would understand better that Tank 7 isn't the only Saison, and that it actually isn't representative of most of what Saison was about for most of the time that Saison has existed. And that in my head, these beers are dry and very drinkable and relatively low ABV, and not, Belgian triples hiding in a disguise. One thing I wish other brewers would do would be have more confidence in, when you're making a Saison, to just make a Saison, not to put 5 other ideas into it. A lot of what we get is people thinking that there's certain ways, because they've had Saisons from brewers that don't specialize in it, that seem like they're just jamming all the ideas they let the brewer get away with in 1/4 into one beer. And I don't think that serves the style. Just you should let the yeast speak for itself, and not try to make it more approachable by adding adjuncts or other things to it, if that's the only Saison you're going to have on draft or available to your customers. But don't let me tell you what to do, dude. If that's your thing, that's what you do, and that's the only beer that marketing is going to let you make that month, then go for it. But I think have a little bit more confidence in your abilities as a brewer and the open-mindedness of your customers to drink something that doesn't have more of a hook than just, this is a really good beer.
Yeah. Well, even though you don't want to tell other brewers what to do, I hereby say, hey, other brewers, listen to what Mike just said. Before we let you go, Mike, can you share social media handles so everybody can learn about your amazing Saisons?
Yeah, the main place you can find us is at @IsWasBrewing on Instagram. That's the only one we update. It kind of feeds some other social media places. But we're constantly updating there. Or our website, iswasbrewing.com. Or you can just email me at mike@iswasbrewing.com if you guys said something stupid.
Cool.
Thanks, Mike. This was awesome.
Mike. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers. So, Em, do you still like Saison, or now you hate it?
How could you hate Saison?
Just kidding. Well, you've seen behind the curtain now. You know how it's made, and maybe
I think there's a lot of like
high chloride water. Maybe you don't
I know high. Yeah, no, I got nothing against water chemistry. I think that's great. There's so much like Yvan gave me more questions than answers, but like in a good way. Like I'm like, I want to know more. And then seeing a brewery excel by basically only making Saison, like makes my heart like grow like 10 sizes. It makes me very, very happy. And then just getting to be a nerd about a style that's really so near and dear to a lot of people in the beer world. This was a really fun episode. I'm very happy, and I know you are too. Do you have anything else to?
Well, I think Yvonne had a couple mic dropping, myth busting moments.
Yeah.
And then I must confess that when I first heard of IsWas and what they're doing, I was like, what? How can you have a brewery that's just Saison? Like, really, how many different Saisons could you make? And then, him explaining what they do, what the different ingredients do, and, thinking about the protein rather than, just, I think a lot of brewers go, oh, I'm going to make 10 different beers. Here's 10 different hops that I can use to make 10. And he's thinking instead, protein levels or, chloride levels and all that. So I think that's great.
And reverse engineering like flavors and like thinking about what you want and then putting it down is like That's so cool.
Yes.
Very cool stuff.
Everybody, tell us what you most liked about this episode, because I think it was a cool episode. Please drop us an email, podcast@allaboutbeer.com, with those thoughts. Or if you have questions for the experts, you can email us again at podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting this show through advertising. Please also visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And please visit allaboutbeer.com/support to support this show and others. Em, how can people reach out to you with their thoughts on this episode?
I am at Pints and Panels, mainly on Instagram nowadays. I am on Facebook as well. I've been neglecting my Blue Sky, and for that I'm very apologetic, but I'm sorry, not sorry. And then my website is pintsandpanels.com. What about you, Don?
I am at the Dawn of Beer on X Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram. And I am at the Beer Dawn on Facebook. And people can always drop me an email. I love receiving emails from our listeners. I'm Don at thedawnofbeer.com. And here is a final word from our sponsors.
What can I say? Once you go salvo, you don't go back. Better yields, repeatable performance, and fewer hop solids to drag you down. No more heavy hop loads, no bitterness spikes, just variety-specific hop flavor. It's the easiest way to sharpen your aroma profile while improving your yields batch after batch. Find out more at shop.hotsteiner.com or ask a sales rep how Salvo can help you.
Tired of inconsistent fermentations and off flavors in your beer? It's time to strike back with Yeast Lightning Nutrient from Escarpment Labs. Unlike generic nutrients, Yeast Lightning is a balanced blend containing bioavailable zinc, magnesium, and B vitamins designed specifically for beer yeast. It's been proven to shorten fermentation times and improve final beer flavor. Plus, it helps you get more generations out of your yeast, saving you money on every batch. Whether it's a dry hopped IPA or a crisp lager, give your yeast the fuel that they actually need. Order your first pack today by emailing sales@escarpmentlabs.com. Mention the All About Beer podcast to get free shipping on your first order.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Athletic Brewing's non-alcoholic beer tastes so good, you won't believe it's non-alcoholic. Their brews are available at over 75,000 grocery stores, liquor stores, bars, and restaurants nationwide. Or you can grab some of their limited time offerings directly from their website. That's where you'll find exciting innovations like their first ever nitrogen-infused dark brew, Emerald Cliffs. And right now, you can save up to 25% and get a free glass and unlock access to exclusive brews when you sign up for the Athletic Club and purchase 4 or more six-packs. Go to athleticbrewing.com to get brews shipped directly to your door or find retailers near you. Near Beer. Terms and conditions. Certain limitations apply. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times.
This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers!
Cheers, everyone.